Ladies and gentlemen, we present to you Dr. Tommy Weir.
In 2011, wait a minute, there we go. In 2011, with skyrocketing oil costs, in the midst of the, in the midst of the repercussions of the Arab Spring and the implications that this was putting on the region, and in really honestly still recovering and reeling from the effects of the global financial crisis, Emirates Airline posted its record profit ever. $1.6 billion. So literally, I want you to catch this. Oil prices are skyrocketing, costs are out of control. The neighborhood that the airline is headquartered in, or its home base is in, is plagued with what we've come to know as the Arab Spring. So tourists were beginning to stop traveling into that area, and simultaneous with it, an industry that was still gravely crippled from the global financial crisis, and they managed to record their record profit, $1.6 billion. But more significant than their record profit that year was it was their 23rd year of profit in a row. That's unheard of for an airline. 23 years of profit in a row, culminating with its record profit. And it leaves me asking a question that you're probably asking as well. How in the world did they do that? And what we're going to do today is we're going to answer a rather simple question with a rather probably complex answer, which is, how do you grow sustainably when the odds are against you? I can't think of an industry that's had the odds against it more than airlines have in the last 2 decades. I don't know about you. I mean, everything that you look at, airlines are closing, they're consolidating, they're declaring bankruptcies, they're taking advantage of global, of regional laws so that they can reduce the costs that are on their balance sheet from the unions. So how in the world do you grow sustainably when the odds are against you? What we're going to do today is I'm going to walk through 4 examples, or four habits. Let's call them habits. Is that a fair word? It's not principles. It's not, it's habits is really what we're going to look at. 4 habits that leaders have in place to be able to grow sustainably when the odds are against you. And then I'm going to wrap it up with a private sector case study that we can dive in, because I know as I'm going through a few of these examples, the question you're going to say in your mind is, yes, but that's public sector and I'm private sector. Sorry, that's private sector. I'm going to wrap up with a public sector example. Sorry, I said that backwards. Okay? So you're going to be looking at these saying, those are private sector examples, but I'm going to wrap it all up in the public sector. So let's answer the question, how in the world did Emirates Airline in 2011 record a record profit? 2001, November 2001 to be specific. Now, if you think about this, November 2001 is 2 months after 9/11. So September 11, 2001 is when the World Trade Crisis, the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 months after that, after 200,000 people have been laid off in the airline industry, after airlines have gone bankrupt, 2 months after that date, Emirates Airline announced its record order. It spent $15 billion buying 58 aircraft. Now the advisors said, now I want you to catch this closely. The advisors said, you're crazy. All of the consultants said, this is ridiculous. Every newspaper, the journalist said, Emirates Airline is making a mistake. Who do these people think they are? There's no way in the world. Does not everybody know the airline industry is over? So here are people advising, saying, don't do this. It's wrong. It's crazy. It's awful. The same journalist that said it's wrong in 2001, 10 years later, 2011, are you ready for this? It was absolutely brilliant what Emirates Airline did a decade ago when they made the biggest, order book ever. So the same journalists are saying, you're crazy, it's awful, it's terrible. And when you succeed, they say, I told you all along, that was really a good move. So we can begin to see the reaction here. But as a leader, and for us in the room, I want us to catch something. Emirates demonstrated the habit that every single one of us needs to do today. If you want to grow sustainably against the odds, you lead today for tomorrow. Emirates Airline did not make a decision in 2001 for that year. It's hysterical. I've sat down with Sheikh Ahmed several times, and the chairman of Emirates Airline, and discussed this. He goes, were they really that dumb? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, really honestly, these people that were telling us not to buy the aircraft in 2001, are they really that dumb? Doesn't everybody know when you buy an airplane, it doesn't show up today? It's not like buying a car. So you walk into the dealership, you buy the car, you take the car today. When you buy an airplane, they're still showing up today. You buy airplanes for a decade into the future, for a long term, and you don't pay for them either. But the amazing thing, and I want you to catch this, do you know what he did? He sent an email to every one of the people that worked for Emirates Airline in 2001 in the midst of the crisis, and he said, everybody, please, just stay focused on the future. This is temporary. We know that recovery is coming. The airline industry is going to recover. It's temporary. And that's a word that we all need to catch in our head, because we get too obsessed with the fluctuation of economic markets. When they go down, we panic. When they go up, we think it'll be like that forever. And this is the one I haven't caught. In the rise of a market, it's going to be good forever. And then it goes down again, and we panic, and we get scared. And what we need to do is we need to realize there is a fluctuation, and that's okay. But what we need to do is we need to lead today for tomorrow. That's habit number one. Habit number two, and this is probably the most essential one when we talk about inclusive growth, is we need to create an environment where others succeed. Our job as leaders, we need to be obsessed with, we need to be thinking about every day of our life. We need to be asking ourselves, how are we creating an environment for others to succeed? I could tell you tons of stories on this, and I probably will tell you several, but one of them relates to McDonald's. And our 17-year-old son was the first intern at McDonald's in the UAE ever this past summer. So what had happened is I do a little bit of work with McDonald's, and over the summer they had said, if you want your 17-year-old to do an internship, that would be fantastic. Now when I hear somebody offer an internship, which is basically 1 month of working at McDonald's, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, making the French fries, the burgers, doing all of this stuff, I was actually quite excited about it, because my working career, guess where it began? McDonald's, as did about 30% of America's working careers began at McDonald's. So when the president of the Middle East and Africa said, would you like an internship for your son at McDonald's? I said, sure, this would be fantastic. But I thought that was normal. I thought that it was common for people to have an internship at McDonald's. So he rings up the owner of the franchise that has 135 McDonald's. He says, we want you to give an internship to Tommy's son. And the guy goes, but we can't. He's 17. And I kind of scratched my head for a moment. I'm like, what? They're like, you can't. He's 17 years old. So they worked through the whole thing. They got the undersecretary of the Ministry of Labor to sign it off. And our 17-year-old went and he did an internship at McDonald's. And it really stimulated in my mind, and it's something I want all of us to think about, is when we delay the beginning of work until you're 18 years old, we're 2 years behind the environment I grew up in. By the time that an 18-year-old starts work, okay, I had already worked for 2 years. And what that begins to build is an environment for success. But there was something that was more interesting that went on. So I'm obsessed with, that's my word for the day, obsessed, but I'm driven by growing our kids to become the best they can. So after the internship, we invited the owner of the franchisees and the president of McDonald's to our house for dinner, so that our son could tell them, thank you for this opportunity. So over dinner, we're there and we're discussing McDonald's. And here were the words that were said to me. So sitting next to me is the owner of the franchisees, and he says, did you know that McDonald's has never, ever had a contract with one of its suppliers? I said, what? So I turned over to Yusuf, who's the president of Middle East and Africa for McDonald's. I said, is that true? I said, you have never, ever had a contract with any one of your suppliers? He said, McDonald's has never, ever had a contract with one of its suppliers. I said, so you mean to tell me, so since the mid-1950s, you've never had a contract with Coca-Cola? He says, no. I said, but doesn't Pepsi knock on your door every day wanting it? They said, foolishly, they do. But we would never, ever leave Coca-Cola because they're our partner to go work with Pepsi so that we can make a little bit more money at the expense of Coca-Cola. I said, hold on, I'm confused now. I'm utterly confused. You don't have a contract with any one of your suppliers. He says, no. He says, but think about this. Every one of our suppliers is better off with us, and we couldn't succeed without them. Our manufacturers of French fries all around the world are significantly bigger because they have worked with McDonald's for all of these years. The people that make our wrappers for the burgers are better. The people that make the bun are better for being with McDonald's. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be any good. And I sat there and I thought, that is a brilliant insight that every one of us in this room needs to be thinking about. It's not that I grow at the expense of somebody else. It's that I grow with them together. Now, typically when I say create an environment where others succeed, most leaders look down. We all say, yes, 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 that sounds really good. But I want to play this out in reality for you. Most of us look at our employees, the people that report to us. So we say, yes, that's the leader's job to help your employees get better. And we think about it a little bit, and then we begin to realize, wait a minute, I should help my peers get better as well. Well, I guess I should help my boss get better. Yeah, that would be a good thing as well. But what we don't usually go to is the extent that McDonald's did and begin to think about we should help our suppliers. Actually, when supplier conversations come up, we usually think we should squeeze them for everything we can. And we come back and we brag to our boss and our peers and our employees and we say, they were willing to do it for $5, but I squeezed them down to $3. Aren't I good? And we take pride in the fact that we squeeze our supplier rather than what McDonald's did of creating an environment for everybody to succeed and said, my job is, that's not my job. My job is to succeed and to help them succeed, to raise everybody up. But here was the kicker. They said, not only have we never had a contract with any supplier, if there is ever a loss to be taken, we will take it at the store level and never in our supply chain. If there is a loss to be taken, we will take it at the store level, not in our supply chain. And I said, are you serious? And they said, yes, because if we take it from Coke or from the French fries or the buns or anybody in our supply chain and they get upset and leave us, we're worse off than having taken that loss in that one quarter or that 1 year. And I thought, my friends, that is what leaders do. And if we're sitting here today looking at inclusive growth, what I need to be thinking about, not how do my people benefit. Okay? I lived in Lebanon for 6 years and I managed to get a Lebanese passport, and I can tell you that the fundamental problem in Lebanon is the tribalism or the sects that sit behind it trying to benefit at the expense of another sect. And what we need to do is we need to begin to realize my job is not to benefit at the expense of somebody else. My job is to help them benefit so mutually we both get better. And that is what we need to be thinking about. When I'm standing here today and I'm talking about growing against the odds, people who help everyone succeed benefit. They do better. Frankly, I've studied leadership for 25 years. It's the only topic I know in the world, okay? I've devoted my entire life to this topic. And if you said, Tommy, tell us, what's a definition of leadership from your opinion? I would say it's right here. It's helping others succeed. Leaders every day of their life wake up thinking about how can I help others lead? That's what we need to do. But frankly, I think it should be the definition of humanity. I don't think we should reserve it for leadership. I think every single person should be thinking, how do I help others succeed? Because when I do that, I get the benefit back. And I'm going to show you in a few minutes a public sector example of this and how a city has actually become the fastest growing city for over a 40-year period of time as a result of helping other people succeed. And how here in Perak, what we can do is when we focus on helping other people succeed, we can create the place to where everybody wants to be and everybody does better. So that's habit number 2. Habit number 1, lead today for tomorrow. Habit number 2, create an environment where others can succeed. Henry Ford, fascinating story. Many of us credit Henry Ford for actually inventing the car, which is completely wrong. Henry Ford did not invent the automobile. Henry Ford had an entirely different vision. He wanted people to succeed. You see, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the Mercedes-Benz had already existed. The car was reserved for the luxury. It was a luxury item for the rich, for the elite. Only the elite in the world had a car. Everybody else still rode around on the back of a carriage, and they used their horses, and they moved around like that. And Henry Ford asked himself a very simple question. He said, why is that so? Why can't I create an environment? Why can't I create an automobile? Why can't I help everybody succeed? Why can't I have an automobile that everybody can afford? Now, does Henry Ford, obviously he succeeds on the back end of this, but his obsession was never once at that point, how can I make more money? Henry Ford did not, and I want you to catch this, make a decision to where everybody could have an automobile so that he could line his pockets with more money. He did it because he thought it was unfair for the elite to have it when everybody's life could be better. So he created an inexpensive version of a very expensive item and made it available to absolutely everybody. He was thinking other success. And you can see this in the DNA of Henry Ford because he did something significantly different in the 19-teens that echoes this more. Henry Ford created, and this is what Henry Ford should be known for, not the car, it should be the $5 workday. In the mid-1900s, the average wage was $2.54 per person per day. So the average worker, the average worker in an assembly line in a manufacturing environment was $2.54 per day. So that was for 9 hours of work. So $2.54 for 9 hours of work. One day, he didn't talk to his shareholders. He didn't do a big press conference. Literally, employees came in. This was in January. And he says, you're now going to get $5 a day, and your workday is going from 9 hours to 8 hours. So Henry Ford doubled the wage that everybody was paid from $2.54 to $5 a day, reduced the work hours from 9 to 8 so that the people who were making a car could buy a car. He was literally thinking about how could he help others succeed. Now we look at this. Where did the money come from? His pocket. He lost money doing this. If you calculate the cost of buying a car compared to the increase of wages, he actually lost $1.5 million over 100 years ago so that he could help other people succeed. It came from his pocket. The money came from his to help others. But what we should catch there, what he was able to do, and if there is any significant business leaders in this room, I want you to hear this point. What he did when he doubled the wage, it forced everybody else to increase their wages as well. Because everybody's wages went up, guess what happened to the economy of Detroit, the economy of Michigan? It went up as well. So now people who weren't working at Ford wanted to work at Ford because the wages went up. Because they were earning more money leaving other companies, they raised their wages. People in surrounding states and areas, guess where they wanted to go work? They wanted to go work in Michigan. So all of a sudden you see this collective environment of the economies going up, and ultimately Henry Ford did benefit individually, but the collective success is that what we should be literally thinking about today. What we should be looking at when we're looking at economic growth is not individualistic economic growth. We should be thinking about how do we help everybody get even more. Now, I spent most of May in a Central Asian country that I'll leave unnamed, working with the president of the country, and they were caught up, and he comes from an economic background, and they were caught up in policy. And they were continuing, we need to get the right policy, we need to get this, we need to get that, and I was in the final stages of writing a book on how Dubai grew, because I'll get to that in a moment, and they wanted to know, how did Dubai actually do this? So I looked at them and I turned and I said, guys, you've got this completely wrong. They said, what's that? I said, no one on the streets cares about your policy. No one is thinking about your policy. People are thinking about, can I eat? They're not thinking about your policy. I said, what you need to shift your attention to is, rather than being in a boardroom and thinking about the policy and trying to believe that economic growth comes from a policy background, which I don't know of examples to where that actually happens, you should be shifting out and saying, how do I help people who aren't eating eat, and those who are eating eat better? I said, if you can shift your focus, shift your nature of your thinking to literally helping people get jobs that don't have jobs, and those that have jobs get better jobs, it is then and only then that you're actually going to have the inclusive growth that you're looking for. You're going to have the economy you're looking for. And what you're effectively going to do is to create an environment where others succeed. And that leads us to set up to we need to be brave. Jeff Bezos, I don't know if you know who he is, but you will in a moment. He walked out of his office in 1994. He walked out of his office one day, and he was a vice president for a company on Wall Street called J.D. Shaw. You probably have never heard of J.D. Shaw, but he's basically an analyst. And he walks out of his office one day, and he's walking up the street at lunchtime to go get a sandwich, and he looks over and he sees this bookstore. And he thinks to himself, I wonder how many books are in that bookstore. So he begins, as only an analyst would, and he begins to calculate the square footage and about how many books would be on a shelf and about how many shelves would be in there. And he calculates it's probably somewhere between 150 and 170,000 books are in that particular bookstore. So he continues on, and he grabs a sandwich, and he's sitting down, and he's eating his sandwich that day. And he starts just kind of dreaming about this for a moment. He thinks, wouldn't it be really cool if there was a bookstore that was big enough to house every title in the world? Now, there's about 1 million new titles a year. So he starts doing the math real quick, and he realizes it's impossible. There's no way that you can do a feasibility study to justify having a bookstore that's big enough to house every title in the world. And he walks away, walking back to his office, and he thinks, what a shame. It would be the coolest thing in the world to walk into a bookstore, to be able to buy any book I wanted, but it's a shame that it's impossible for that to happen. Later that day, he's doing his research, and a statistic comes across his desk that this thing called the World Wide Web is growing at 2,300% per year. Not even the internet yet. Netscape doesn't even exist yet. Netscape that has gone defunct doesn't even exist yet, okay? So he's sitting there and he's thinking about it, and he sees 2,300%. He's like, that's fast growth. 2,300% per annum, year-on-year growth. That is rapid growth. A few days pass by, and he's still on one side of his brain. He's thinking about this bookstore, and wouldn't it be really cool, but it's impossible to happen. And then he's thinking also about this 2,300% growth year on year, and he's like, you know, I don't really know what this World Wide Web thing means or does. I don't know how many people are using it, but 2,300% growth year on year, that needs some attention. I should do something with that. So he begins to think through his mind, what could you do with this thing that's growing? He goes through music. No, it's too competitive an environment. There's only about 6 major players in it. And he's working through, and he thinks, that bookstore. We should create a bookstore on this thing called the World Wide Web to where anybody can buy any book they want. That's a fantastic idea. It's growing at 2,300%. It'd be great if there was this bookstore. So he turns to his boss and he says, I want to go start a bookstore on this World Wide Web. And his boss goes, what's that? So he tries to explain the World Wide Web, and he's like, you're crazy. Why in the world would you ever want to do that? So he turns to his friends and explains to them, there's this thing called the World Wide Web. It's growing at 2,300%. I want to do this bookstore for everybody on it. And they said to him, but you have a good job. You're a vice president on Wall Street. Why would you want to leave your good job to go do that? So he spends the next several weeks, and everybody he talks to, he's explaining his idea, and everybody says to him, bad idea, don't do it, this is awful, and continues on and on of why it won't work. Now his wife turns to him and says, as a very good spouse would, I support you 100% whatever you want to do. So everybody other than his wife, who I'm not sure she really meant the 100%, but he took it quite literally, have said, don't do it, it's a bad idea. But Jeff doesn't have enough money. So he goes to his parents and he says, Mom and Dad, I want your life savings. For what? There's this thing called this World Wide Web, and I want to create a bookstore on it. He says later, he goes, I can guarantee you my parents had no clue what I was doing, but because I was their son, they gave me their life savings. But in the midst of asking for the life savings of a few $100,000, they said, but what's the chance of success? He goes, well, there's a 70% chance of failure. And he says, but I felt really good because that's actually 3 times better than somebody else's. He said, usually the percent chance in a startup, the chance of success is 10%. I was giving myself 30%. I really believed in my idea. So Jeff takes the few $100,000 and he starts Amazon. He was brave. Jeff Bezos was brave to stand against what we would normally see. And what he realized that he needed to do was to create something. He lived his vision, he lived his dream out. And to become the leaders that we need to do, to grow sustainably against the odds, you have to be brave. Now, I've spent my entire life, as I said, studying leadership, and I study companies, and I like a unique type of leadership. I don't like average leadership. I like leadership that's related to success. So I like the leadership of places like Coca-Cola. When Coca-Cola really grew, I like the story of McDonald's. I like cities like Dubai that have grown absolutely against the odds. I like Emirates Airlines story. I like these stories of success. But I found something interesting. Now, I just figured this out in the last year. Like really figured out my thought on this. I have always lived in utopia when it came to success. I thought that the headlines of Financial Times and the companies that got there just were always successful. Without really thinking through it naively, okay, I just assumed they were very successful. I never really thought about Amazon not being successful. I never thought about Jeff Bezos' hard days when he made the decision to leave the job and the fight he had at the beginning. I never thought about Walt Disney going bankrupt 3 times. I never thought about the fact that Walt Disney actually lost Wilbur the rabbit that I didn't know who was, okay? I never thought about the fact that the people that took Wilbur the rabbit from him actually took all of his artists from him, and he's not even 30 yet. But had he not gone bankrupt 3 times, had he not lost Wilbur the rabbit, had he not lost all of his artists, we wouldn't have had Mickey Mouse. I just assume, in my mind, I know I'm wrong in my assumption, that one day Walt Disney decides, I'm going to draw this mouse, and the mouse shows up everywhere in the world and become this rage hit, and that was the first thing he ever did in his life. I forget about all of the years before. I forget about how brave it is to be sitting, and the only thing that you have to eat is from a can of beans, and eating those beans, and continuing to take the risk with no money. He can't pay his rent, so he's living in his little tiny studio that he does his actually drawing from, not even having a cot to work from. I forget about Jeff Bezos, literally, okay, at the beginning of the career, sitting down on his knees, okay, as they're packaging the books, and Jeff is doing the packaging himself. And he turns to the guy beside him and he says, "This is killing our knees." And the guy goes, "It is." And Jeff goes, "I've got an idea." And the guy goes, "What's that?" He goes, "Let's get knee pads." And the guy beside him goes, "I've got a better idea." He said, "What's that?" He goes, "Let's get tables." And Jeff goes, I looked at him, I thought, that was the smartest thing I've ever heard in my life. We should be sitting at tables, not on our knees. You're a genius. And I forget about these sides of the stories. And what it sets up for us is we need to take risk. Growth doesn't show up. Growth does not automatically show up. You have to take risk. Now, when I sit in environments like this and have these dialogues and talk with leaders around the world, a topic comes up. And I'm going to address it now because it's going to come up in the Q&A if I don't. And it's sustainability. And the issue is we begin to think, yes, but risk and sustainability don't go together. But we have a wrong definition of sustainability when it comes from an economic perspective. We believe, we have been taught, we have encapsulated Western economist thinking that says that we should remove risks. To be sustainable, we should remove the risk. Sustainability is not about removing the risk. Sustainability is about being able to survive during the risk. Because it's absolutely impossible to remove all the risks that are going to be in front of you. The question is, can you survive when the risks come, when they're in front of you? Can I push through the risks that are going to come? Because you live in a day to where risks are going to continue to sit before you. I gave a speech in Nigeria last week, and at the end they came up and they said, yes, but what about sustainability? What about risk? What about risk management? I said, it's interesting, and I walked through every example I had used that day. I said, never once did any of these leaders talk about risk management, because frankly, risk management would keep them from becoming great. I'm not saying that this is Vegas-style gambling. But if you begin to look, the advisors on my opening story with Emirates Airline in 2001 told them what? Not to buy the planes. The market conditions told them what? Don't buy the planes. The banks actually were telling them, don't buy the planes. Everybody was saying, don't buy the planes. 10 years later, everybody said, great job buying the planes. So it makes me question which advisor I want to listen to when it actually comes to the growth and what we're driving through. Now, what I want each of you to do now is I want you to picture living in a place without running water and electricity. So I want every one of you to picture in your mind a home living someplace that does not have running water and electricity. Some of you may have possibly grew up someplace like that, have lived there yourself. Some of you have traveled to places in rural areas around the world and where you've actually seen it with your own eyes. And some of you have seen it in travel magazines or on the internet. But I want each of you to picture in your mind someplace that does not have running water and electricity. Now, when I think about that, for me, this comes up. This is Abraham Lincoln's house. I happened to grow up in the same town that Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the U.S., came from. Now, mind you, 150 years difference in our age. But we grew up in the same town, and as a child, we used to go the few miles outside of town, and we would go to what's called Lincoln Log Cabin State Park, and we would look at this house. Now, the house I grew up in was built in 1885, so I lived in an old house. This house is older. Okay, and we would go and we would look and we begin to think about what it's like to not have running water or electricity and what life must have been like for Abraham Lincoln in this area and what was going on, and we would think about it. Now, with that image, everybody's got your own image in your mind of not having running water and electricity, or you have my image now, and I want you to hear these words. Are you ready? In 5 years, every one of you is going to have running water and electricity. Many of you are nodding your head going, yeah, that'd be nice. But honestly, over half of us would say, why? What's wrong with my kerosene lamp? What's wrong with the guy that brings the water by once a week so we can have a bath and a little bit to drink from? What's wrong with the way it is today? We would hear these words, and in 5 years, everybody's going to have running water and electricity, and we would be thinking, But it's okay now. We have running water and electricity, so we actually think it's a good idea. But the people without it would have been thinking, what's wrong with the way it is? Now, the same leader who's telling you that in 5 years you're going to have running water and electricity, he says to you, he says, by the way, we've got this small little creek, this port area, and the sand is building up inside of it. Because the sand's building up, the boats aren't able to come anymore. And because the boat's not coming, we're not going to have any business anymore. And if we don't have any business, we won't have any money. And if we don't have any money, we won't be able to eat. And we don't have any food other than coming on these boats that are coming in. So what we're going to do is we're going to dig out the sand in this small little, I don't know, what do you want to call it, a creek, this small little port we have. We're going to dig the sand out so more boats can come in. And at that point, we would say, you know what, that's a good idea because eating is good. I'm okay with kerosene lamps, but I like my food, okay? So yeah, go ahead and dig the sand out of this so that the boats can come in, so that we can get, you know, more food, more business, so that it can continue. So in the next 5 years, we're going to have running water and electricity, and we're going to dig the sand out of this thing now. Oh, by the way, we're going to build a bridge over this creek as well. A what? A bridge. What's a bridge? Now think about this. If I don't have running water and electricity, I don't have an iPhone. And if I don't have an iPhone, I don't have news. And I actually don't even have the primitive version of the iPhone called a TV. So I don't have an iPhone, I don't have a TV. If I don't have running water and electricity, I actually don't even have a newspaper. So I get my news literally from the 2 or 3 people from outside who come into where I am. And I sit down and I say, tell me, what's it like in that big world out there? Teach me what's going on out there for everybody else. That's where I get my news from. Or maybe the 1 or 2 of our own people that have traveled outside. So the only news I hear is from other people. And now this guy's saying to me, in 5 years you're going to have running water and electricity. We're going to dig the sand out of this thing called this creek. And we're going to build a bridge over it, but I don't even know what a bridge is, but we don't even have paved roads. A bridge? Our roads aren't even paved yet. Yes, and we're also going to build an airport. A what? An airport. Why are we going to build an airport? So people can come here. And because we're building an airport, we're going to build a hotel. And because we're building an airport, we're also going to build a car park for 500 cars. But there aren't 500 cars here. Why are you building a car park for 500 cars? That was Sheikh Rashid in 1959 in Dubai. In his first year as the ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Rashid told the people, in 5 years, every one of you is going to have running water and electricity. And he made that choice. Do you know why? He made that choice because his father got cholera in 1932. And he knew that the source of water that the people had was spoiled. And he wanted everybody to have fresh water and electricity at their houses. And he said also, we're going to dredge that creek out so that the ships can come in because they're getting stuck now. Ships is the wrong word. The big dhows, okay? I mean, ship would be like a completely wrong word. Dhows. And we're going to build a bridge so we don't have to go 14 kilometers around the creek anymore, so we can go straight over it, so that we can do business better. Every one of you can do business better. And in addition to that, we're going to build an airport so you don't have to do the day's drive to Sharjah. And because we're building an airport, we're going to build an 8-room hotel and a car park for 500 cars. Oh, and by the way, we don't have any money. Dubai didn't discover oil till 1966 and did not begin to get oil till 1969, a decade later. So here's a leader who is absolutely obsessed with your success, with somebody else's success. Honestly, as a leader, it would be a lot easier to do nothing. Now, if you really start to unfold that's Dubai in 1959, okay? That's in some of your lifetimes, almost mine, but that's in some of your lifetimes, okay? And he sat down and he laid all of these out. It would be easier to do nothing, but yet he was thinking about something entirely different at that particular point. And what it raises up for us, if you want to grow against the odds, you need to have an ambitious appetite. Now, I spent 3 years, the last 3 years, researching Dubai. In 2008, I was kind of caught up with this question. I was living in Dubai. I'd been living there for a while, and I looked at buildings literally like they popped up out of the sand like weeds do in my yard. Okay, like they just pop up. And I remember sitting there one day, and I thought to myself, how? This is not normal. I did not know how abnormal it was. I just knew it was not normal at the time. In a moment, I'm going to tell you how abnormal it is. And I wanted to know, how did this happen? So in the summer of 2008, I decided I was going to set out and I was going to answer this question. I was going to go discover how Dubai grew, and I was convinced it had to be from leadership, because if you know much about Dubai, Dubai has actually always been broke. Dubai has never had money. Okay, contrary to what the news and the media says, Abu Dhabi has money. Dubai's always been broke. Dubai's broke today. Dubai has always been broke. Dubai has always lived in the red. Okay, so I thought, how did this happen? And then, as we know, September 2008, the financial crisis happened. And like all good researchers, I pushed pause. I thought, I want to see if there's really a story here. So I sat back and thought, let's see if these weeds can actually really keep growing. Does this really happen, or is this like an accident? So 4 years passed. It was spring of 2012. I sat back down and I said, they did it. They actually survived this. The economy is growing. How in the world did this happen? So I really sat down and I spent 3 years. I did a 20,000-page literature review, and I interviewed over 200 leaders to answer the very simple question, how did Dubai become Dubai? And the 4 habits that I gave earlier actually come out of this book. I just happen to use private sector examples of where they are as well, so that you're not going, it's only related to Dubai, to lay out for you. But I want to walk through the picture, because some of us think that Dubai had a rosy, like absolutely, it just showed up like it is today. December 3rd, 1971, Sheikh Zayed, the first president of the UAE, said, I want everybody in Dubai and the Northern Emirates has a bachelor's degree and above to come visit me. So I want everybody who has a bachelor's degree and above to come visit me. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's about this many people. 25 people that had a bachelor's degree and above came to visit him on that day. December 3rd, 1971, Dubai and the Northern Emirates only had 25 bachelor degree holders. The entire country, the United Arab Emirates, had a whopping 45. Now you have to think about this. The Brits left the day before. Okay, so the Brits left the day before. This is the day after the unification of the Federation. Okay, there's 45. So we're left with that. I just want you to get this into your mind of how easy it would have been to be a leader then, okay? So here we are. We're under this protectorate of the British. They lose all of their money. They go through the austerity of the 1960s. They say to you, by the way, we're going to leave. The rulers of the UAE scratched their head in the late 60s as the Brits are saying they're going to leave. And what the UAE really liked about the Brits was the big ships that had the guns. Okay? The big ships with the guns that sat in their ports kept everybody else away. This is the 60s. Okay? Abu Dhabi has oil now. Dubai just got it in 69. This is before Dubai even gets the oil. They're scratching their head going, these Brits are leaving with their ships and their guns. What are we going to do? Iran is going to make us them. Let's all come together, because together we're going to be stronger. That's a great idea. So they create the United Arab Emirates. So December 3rd, 1971, 45 people with a bachelor's degree, they had to, are you ready for this? Set up embassies around the world, set up a Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Defense, Health, Labor, all of this. They didn't have enough bachelor degree holders for every ambassador around the world to even have a bachelor's degree. Talk about the odds being against you, wouldn't you agree? They had virtually nothing, although a little bit of oil that started to pump now. But they had virtually nothing that was going on then. So what we see, though, is over the next 40 years, Dubai was the fastest growing economy in the world over the following 40 years. Dubai grew at a factor of 11, Singapore grew at a factor of 10, Hong Kong grew at a factor of 7. Coming from 25 bachelor degree holders, okay? And as we saw a moment ago, only 1 decade they had had electricity and water. They grew at a factor of 11 over a 40-year period of time. I put a couple of circles up here for you. This is the UAE's GDP growth rate, and you're seeing the moving average is the green line in the middle of the screen. So we think, again, that, wow, this was just always up. Everything was fantastic. Everything was great. Now, when I look at that, that's not the rosiest picture in the world. But I want to point out a few things. When you look right here to 1979, the one that's about 4 in, there's a red circle there. That was the opening of Port Jebel Ali. Port Jebel Ali today is the 9th busiest port in the world. Now, when he was building the port earlier in the 70s, okay, when Sheikh Rashid decided, let's build Port Jebel Ali, they already had the creek that they had dredged out on borrowed money, because they went to Kuwait and Qatar and Bahrain and anybody else that would give them a dime, and they borrowed money from them. They had opened this thing, or they called Mina Rashid, Port Rashid. Port Rashid, okay, was running at 1/3 of its capacity. And the ruler goes, let's triple the size of it. So here it is running at 1/3 of its capacity. Let's triple the size, which that's ambitious. And most of us would say, wait. Let's actually get it up to 70, 80%, and then we can look at expanding the size. He decides to triple it. But while he's tripling Port Rashid, that's running at 1/3 of capacity, about 50 kilometers outside of town, in the middle of literally nowhere, on the road called Death, because that's what they called the highway going between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, on the road called Death, he goes, let's build Port Jebel Ali. So he's taking this little bit of money that they're getting, rather than making money making oil their strategy like everybody else in the Gulf did. Actually, every other OPEC country did. They said, let's use that to drive our strategy. So here he is digging in the middle of nowhere. And when I say nowhere, he's literally digging in the middle of nowhere to create this port. The people in the community, they think he's gone senile. They think our ruler, the guy that gave us... Now, he did give them running water and electricity. He did give them a bridge. He did give them an airport. He did give them roads. He gave them everything. He paid back all of his debts ahead of schedule, although they never had any money. He managed to pay back his debt. And now he's building this thing. And they're like, he's gone senile. He's gone mad. What in the world is he doing? So they go to his son, Sheikh Mohammed, who's the current ruler. And these guys go, your dad, he's going crazy in his old age. He's losing his mind. Can you go have a talk with him? Can you go talk to your father about what's going on? So Sheikh Mohammed goes out to him and he meets him at the site and he says, Dad, the people in the community, they're a bit worried. They're worried about our future. They don't really understand what you're doing here and why you're doing it, and they think we should stop. So Sheikh Rashid has his tawaf, a small pipe in his mouth, takes his pipe out, looks down at the ground, looks back up, carries on. And Sheikh Mohammed goes, when my dad doesn't answer your question, you don't ask again. So he's thinking, maybe I shouldn't have asked that question. So his dad turns to him and says, son, come with me. They jump in the truck and they're heading back to Dubai. And he says, son, you asked me a question back there in front of others. I didn't want to answer that. He said, but you and they don't understand what I'm doing. I'm doing for you today what you won't be able to do tomorrow. And Sheikh Mohammed said that left such an impression for me that he's regularly quoted as saying, I don't know if I'm a good leader or not, but I can tell you this, I'm leading for 20 to 30 years into the future. As we're sitting here today and we're talking about the future of Perak, leaders, stop thinking about today and build for a generation into the future. One of the things, there's 12 habits that came out, and I'm going to put these up in a second, but one of the things that came out in Dubai, there's a constant leading today for tomorrow, and tomorrow is a generation out. Making decisions today for the next generation to have a better future, to see that they go on. And I'm showing that happened. 1985, okay? Now 1985 in the Gulf, are you ready for this? Was the Iran-Iraq war. Oil prices are following. No tourists are there. Nobody's there at all. And Sheikh Mohammed goes, let's start Emirates Airline. Literally, as the things are plummeting around, let's start Emirates Airline. We can continue across there. 1999, which is kind of a riskier period, but less so than it was before. I mean, you can see the GDP crash, okay, in 98 that happened. In 99, let's announce as e-government. We're going to make all of our government services electronic. 2010, 2011, reeling from the effects of the global financial crisis. When most people are saying, Dubai's done, Expo 2020, come to Dubai, and announces the ambition that's necessary to support that. You can see they make decisions when odds are against them. And as I said, there's 12 different habits that come out. And I want to highlight a couple of these. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories from the public sector that you can benefit and you can learn from. A moment ago, I shared one in regards to lead today for tomorrow's future when we were looking at Port Jebel Ali. The one in the middle, going back to what we said earlier, create an environment for others to succeed. In 1901, not 1991, not 2001, 1901, there were around 4,000 people living in Dubai. It was the tiniest little port you could possibly imagine. There was a ruler there then named Maktoum bin Hashir. Now, Maktoum bin Hashir is leading this small little tribe of 4,000 people. They're barely surviving. They have nothing at all. They're not even in the pearl environment yet. They haven't even really got into pearl trade yet. And a nationalist government takes over in Iran and starts putting pressure on in Persia at the time. A nationalist government takes over and starts putting pressure on the Arab traders who are down on the coast. The Arab traders on the coast are actually from Sharjah and Ras Al Khaimah, Dubai's neighbors. So the ruler's sitting there and he's thinking, what can we do? And he goes, I've got an idea. Get him to come here. So here he is sitting in his majlis. And he says, let's get them all to come here. And can you imagine, you're in there, 4,000 of you living there, virtually, you have nothing. And he's saying, let's take advantage of their disadvantage over there. While they're increasing taxes on them, and while they're adding fees and putting pressure on the Arab traders, let's get them to come here. So he sends an envoy 178 kilometers across the sea to say, come to Dubai. And I can just imagine it. So let's take these guys as the Arab traders, for picturesquely, okay? So here you are, you're in southern Iran. And all of a sudden this envoy from Dubai comes up and they say, please come to Dubai. And they would be going, what's Dubai? We've never even heard of this thing called Dubai. What are you talking about? Yes, yes, yes. But come, why would I come to Dubai? 1901. Maktoum bin Hashir had the foresight to say, if you come to Dubai, we'll give you free land and no taxes. He knew that if he could get the key merchants to come to Dubai, then everybody else would come to Dubai as well. 1901. This is 85 years, 84 years prior to Dubai officially having free zones. He started the concept and the strategy of having free zones. By you come here, no taxes. And guess what happened? Because those key merchants came, the camel caravan started coming into Dubai. Because the camel caravan was coming, more of the small little boats and ships started coming, and trade shifted from Sharjah and Ras Al Khaimah. You can draw your own correlations if you were to do something similar to this. I won't say it out loud. Trade would shift from other places into your own area, and all of a sudden you started seeing an economy begin to grow because they had the foresight to look a generation in the future and to create an environment where others could succeed. If you were to ask anybody living in Dubai today, why do you live in Dubai? Including the Emiratis, they will tell you, I live here because I can do better here than I can do elsewhere. To put this in perspective, not only was Dubai the fastest growing economy over a 40-year period of time, between 1975 and 1995, the population quadrupled. And between 1995 and 2015, it doubled again. So 1975 to 95, the population quadrupled, and from 95 to 2015, it doubled again. It is an environment where others can succeed. I'm not saying copy their strategy. I'm saying create an environment where others can succeed. That is how you grow against the odds. Now, I'm just going to hit a couple of these others, and then we're going to open up for questions in a moment, because they work in concert. They have to work together. And one of those is we've talked about regularly, lead today for tomorrow's future. I have no idea how in the world the founder of Dubai figured this out. No one can tell me how. But in 1833, sitting in the middle of what's called the Liwa Desert, and when I say desert, I mean we're in the heart, smack dab in the middle of the desert, okay? He turns to the other rulers, okay? So they're in this tribal meeting, and he says, gentlemen, I think it's time for a third form of government. A what? A third form of government. But what's wrong with what we have today? Why do we need a new form of government? At that time, there were two forms of government. One form was the stick, or the sword, or what we would call today a military regime. Okay? So heavy-handed dictatorship, military regime was one form. And the other form, which is what this tribe enjoyed, was a loyalty-based, a fatherly-based, to where you took care of your people as a father takes care of his children. And Maktoum bin Bhutto, a different Maktoum, but Maktoum bin Bhutto, turns and he says, it's time for us to have an economic form. We need to put prosperity in our people's hands. So in 1833, he begins to realize our job as the government is to put prosperity into our people's hands. And he realized it right there. And the others said, we don't want anything to do with this at all. We're not interested. And he took 1,200 people. And here's how brave he was and how much he believed in it. This is May of 1833. Now, I don't know if you know the Gulf very well or not. It's hot in May. It's really hot in May. We don't have cars. We don't have highways. We don't have any good means of transportation other than foot and the back of camels. And he says, let's go, guys. Let's get prosperity into your hands, and makes the arduous 6-day travel trip through the heat and the agony of the desert conditions to go set up what we now know as Dubai. 6 days. Now, if I was the leader, I would have said, let's wait till winter. And let's do it when it's a little bit cooler. But he had the foresight to see what it is that we should actually be doing. We should be looking into the future. And I want to echo one of the other points that I mentioned, which is be brave. There's a lot of questions in regard to the sustainability of Dubai's model. A lot of people say, but when you look at the borrowing of the money, can it really exist? Does it really go on? And usually when this comes up, they're referencing November 2008, and they're referencing the financial crisis. Well, you have the right month, November, to think about. You have the wrong year, though. What you should actually be thinking about is November 1928. In 1928, Dubai's economy was built upon the pearl crisis. Actually, I would argue, Dubai's economy was built on borrowed money. The trade that Dubai did was pearls. But the reason that I say borrowed money, here's what happened. The residents of Dubai went out into the Gulf, and they spent 6 months in the pearl season diving, getting the pearls out. They came back, they sold the pearls. Now, as all good business people do, especially the business people there, early in the 20s, they realized, wait a minute, if more boats go out and more divers go out, we can get more pearls. When we get more pearls, we can sell the pearls and get more money. And when we get more money, we can buy more boats, and we can send more divers out. And because we're getting more money, guess what? We can borrow money from other people so we can get even more boats and have even more divers. So during the 20s, every year, they started borrowing more money, and they started sending more people out in order to be able to dive and to get the pearls. Now, you would pay half of the salary at the beginning of the pearl season. You'd pay the other half of the salary at the end of the pearl season. 1928, record haul. They brought in more pearls than they had ever brought in. So here they are. The boats are filled with the pearls. They're making their way back to shore in November. And as they would make their way back, they would chant. They're effectively sing songs, okay? And they were singing songs of elation and joy and excitement. But what they didn't know was what happened while they were out in that particular pearl season. While they were out getting more pearls than they ever had, the Japanese created cultured pearls. So somebody in a laboratory figured out how to actually create a pearl. So all of a sudden, the market's flooded with these cultured pearls. These pearls on their boat are now worthless. They're not worth anything at all. So as they're making their way back to the shore, the townspeople would always greet them at the coast, so excited to see the husbands and the fathers and everybody there. And usually there's smiles on their face, and you could see the excitement. So the pearlers would tell the stories as they're coming in, and they're chanting, and they're so excited that people are standing on the shore, and they have long, sad faces. And they're wondering, why are these people sad? What's wrong? What's going on there? And as they got to the shore, they realized that there were no traders, nobody to buy the pearls, and they had gone bankrupt. And they had done worse than gone bankrupt. They actually owed people money because they had borrowed money to get into this problem, and they owed all of these people this money. What are we going to do? We're going to starve. We're going to die. Life is over as we know it. And the ruler's son, actually, Sheikh Rashid, who we talked about a moment ago, who's just in his late teens, he turned to the people and he said, okay, what are we good at? And one of the guys goes, pearling. And he says, that's it, the sea. Let's go be fishermen. And he literally shifts their focus back, sends them right back out in there. They start fishing. Now, mind you, the economy didn't bounce back overnight, but it became able to survive through it. They started fishing, they started selling everything related to the fish, and they managed to survive as they went through this. And as we step back, there's something on being brave that I learned working through this. As I said, I spent 3 years researching it. Here's the mantra in Dubai: grow when you can. Elongate growth as much as possible. You know the game Bubbles, to where the kids stick the little I don't know, the little stick in the soapy water, and then they blow the bubble and the bubble goes out. Now, if you think about this game for a moment, we talk about economic bubbles. Now, I have 5 kids, and we play the game Bubbles in our backyard, and I've never heard one of my kids go, wait, Bubba, please. Let's mitigate our risk right now. Let's make the bubble as small as possible so if it busts, it doesn't make a big issue. They actually say, let's make the bubble as big as possible and let's see how big it can go. And the moment the bubble bursts, what do? They reach right back in and they stick it back in and they blow it again. And they make it as big as possible. I wish I could take credit for this. A journalist in 1990 actually said, somebody said, aren't you worried about the bubble in Dubai bursting? He said, no, they'll just stick their wand back in the soapy bag they have and make another bubble. And if you look at it and you really look at it, and I realize there's economists in the room right now, and the economists are just chomping at the bit to take me to task on this. But here's what I've learned. Dubai sprints into growth, and the moment there's a problem, they sprint back out of it. And they take solitude and they take comfort in the fact that we stay completely focused on growth. And I'm going to wrap up with this one story here. And it's a guy named Majid Al Futtaim. Majid Al Futtaim built the biggest shopping mall in the Middle East, and it's the number 7th producing in the world. And as he was building this mall, he already had one called Deira City Center. So he already had a really good shopping mall. And he decides to build Mall of the Emirates, the one with the ski slope. But he's building it, again, a long way from where everybody lives. And everybody's like, what is up with this? Why is he building in the middle of the desert? What's going on with this? So this is the story that's going on. Actually, they were saying, we feel sorry for the old man as he lost his mind, is literally what they were saying. And this isn't the economists or the expats, it's his neighbors. So 2 years ago, we were sitting down during Ramadan, and we were sitting down for sahur in the middle of the night at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember sitting, it was Mr. Majid was sitting there, Iyad Mullis, the CEO of Majid Al Futtaim, myself and the ambassador from Singapore, and the other 60 people in the room were all Emiratis. Now, I'm not very good at keeping my mouth shut. And I wanted to ask Mr. Majid how he kept everybody focused. So I'm sitting there that night, and I lean over and I say, Mr. Majid, I've got a question if you don't mind. Sure, please, go ahead. I said, when you were building Souq al-Nakhil, or what's called Mall of the Emirates now, there were a lot of people questioning the sanity of the project. They were questioning his sanity. But I didn't want to say, I thought that would be too rude. So I just said the sanity of the project. And they really didn't understand what you were doing and why you were doing it and what was going on. I said, so my question for you is how did you stay focused and keep everybody else focused when everybody was telling you what you're doing is wrong and it's bad? Now, when the white guy speaks in an all-Arab room, with the exception of the ambassador, everybody listens. And this isn't really what I wanted right now. I wanted more of a private conversation, so everybody had set their knife and fork down. And everybody's leaning forward. And Mr. Majid drops his head, looks at me, and I'm thinking when he looked at me, it's time for me to leave. This isn't going well. He drops his head again and he looks up. Please, can you not ask me a question about where we're going? That was so long ago. He picks his knife and fork back up. Everybody else picks their knife and fork back up, and I drop to my head. And I thought to myself, so long ago, 7 years. The story I'm asking about was 7 years ago. And I thought, you know, the interesting thing is, while he didn't actually answer my question, he completely answered the question that every one of us needs to be thinking about now, which is the future. And when we're looking at growing against the odds, we need to be making decisions for the future. We need to be creating an environment for success. You do understand that 7 stores in Mall of the Emirates are the fastest growing in the world. He's created an environment for other people to succeed. A lot of people get to buy stuff they don't even need, thanks to Majid Al Futtaim. Okay, thanks to Dubai and these habits, what we see is lead today for tomorrow. Create an environment for others to succeed. Be brave. Sprint into your growth. Sprint. Don't walk. Don't think. Sprint into your growth. And if a problem comes, sprint on your way out of it and be brave. That's what you need to do if you want to grow against the odds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tommy, for that very insightful discussion. Now, we're going to open the questions here to members of the floor, and we have our officials with the microphone. So we're going to start off, if we have our guest of honor, perhaps, who have a question. Okay, we have a gentleman.
Thank you.
Tommy, I have a question for you. My name is Suresh. I'm a proud Asian. The Western concept of democracy is predominantly based on a neoliberal capitalist economic model, which in turn is premised by centralization of capital and globalization and everything that comes with it. The question I put it to you, is that inappropriate for inclusivity, bridging of the disparity of wealth, and inclusive and sustainable growth for Asia? Thank you.
Yeah, if you look to the very top center point there, it's, I don't know how I want to begin this, but I will tell you that if you follow me on Twitter, you will get my view of it. 6 or 7 days ago, I tweeted, I think America's experiment with democracy has clearly failed in the Middle East, or I didn't say in the Middle East, it's clearly failed, so maybe it's time that we actually focus on growth and saving lives. So I am actually, but I go to a form of leadership that's probably equally not as appealing to some people. That top word, act decisively and give direction, is very autocratic. If you look through every example I gave, you see strong leaders who are making decisions and taking people forward. But they're able to take people forward because they have ambition that is better for others, not ambition for themselves. So if you're sitting in the room right now and you're after your fame, your fortune, and your power, you will fail. Remember I said there's these kinds of leaders, the average, and then there's the outlier leaders. The outlier leaders, if you go through all of their lives, they have never focused on their fame, their fortune, their power. They've gotten fame, they've gotten fortune, they've gotten power, but they've never really cared about it. That's never been their obsession. So for this to work, though, these actually work together. I cannot be a good, strong, decisive leader giving clear direction if I don't have an ambition where I'm leading for a future and where I'm loyal. So if you want to build an environment of inclusion, it's not about diversifying wealth. It's about helping people have wealth. And we need to shift from take from the rich person's hand to give it to the poor to how do we help both get more? That's what our thinking needs to be. Because when I take from the rich and give to the poor, that doesn't necessarily solve my long-term economic issue. What I should be thinking about is how do I help everybody have more? And I should turn to the guy who has and say, you've done well. How do we use your thinking, your environment, your economy to have more? Can't you be the Henry Ford of the day? Can't you double the wages so that others copy you and our economy grows? Can't you be that person? That's not necessarily taking out of his pocket as charity. That's helping to lift the whole thing up. So I'm not a fan of democracy. I'm going to lose my passport one day over this issue. That's why I have a backup one. Next question.
Thank you. Good morning. Dr. Tommy Weir, you are my new favorite speaker. Can we get a big round of applause for Dr. Tommy, please? That was very engaging.
Thank you.
Thank you. Many of the examples you gave were examples of personal strength and fortitude and people with vision. I'm from the Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia, which is the Malaysian Innovation Foundation. We deal with grassroots around the country. And when you're talking about people with no running water, electricity, we deal with that all the time. So these guys, like you said, are concerned about putting food on the table. And for them to be brave, And for them to have a vision even is very difficult. So how do we create that environment for the people who really need, a goal even, for them to succeed and for them to innovate and for them to improve themselves? Thank you.
That's a fantastic question. I mean, I didn't get into it due to our time's sake today, but if I had about another hour or 2 hours with you, I could walk you through the intimacy of what happened in Dubai, because that's effectively what we were dealing with when this scenario was going on. Now, if I follow this through, go to 1959 with me. Go there. There's no running water. There's no electricity. There's minimal trade. There's what would there be, about 20,000 people that are living there then? No, sorry, it's about 40,000 people that are living there. I have a small little cottage shop, best case scenario. You've got literally Hassan the camel, the guy that delivers the water on the back of a camel. That's his job. That's his business, not his job. And we have a lot of what I would classify as kind of the rural economy types of jobs and environments that go on. And the leader said, we're going to build a bridge. Now, I don't think that anybody in Dubai knew how to build the bridge. Okay? They hired Atkins. Atkins knew how to build the bridge. And Sheikh Rashid literally took people from the community and put them on the project and had them start working and getting jobs to begin to build skill, labor, to learn to work, to have ambition, to literally condition the entire environment how to work. And I don't mean work ethic. I mean how to do skilled labor, and started that journey. So if I think about this was going on for a decade. A decade later, there's only 25 people with a bachelor's degree or higher. Today, one of the top geneticists in the world is an Emirati. She has a PhD in a rare form of genetics that there's 4 in the world that have. Where did this come from? It came from taking a beginning step. Do I expect, I hope for, and expect are different words, okay? I would love to see microeconomies become Amazons overnight. But I'm astute enough to know that economies come from development generation after generation. Success comes from generation after generation. If I was to go back to the era of Henry Ford, okay, people had no running water and electricity. They were rough working conditions. There were a few industrialists, a few titans of industry that did, but the others started with people gave them jobs, and as the people continued to work, they continued to move on up. And what we should be thinking about, you're smart in this room, and you know Parag. And what you should be thinking about is literally, how can we change the quantum and the number of people working? This should be your question you should be answering, is not how do we add a couple hundred jobs? How do we create the quantums? What do we do? Most societies grew on the back of hard infrastructure. Hard infrastructure development is where the jobs came from. And once we had the jobs in the skilled environments, we continued to mature upward. This would be no different in that example there. It's a great question, but we should literally be thinking about how do we actually move those jobs forward and continue to get people who are doing more. Next.
Morning. Hi, Tommy.
Hi.
I'm Sarah from University Kebangsaan, Malaysia. Well, I'm fascinated with the matrix where you have the 12 traits in order to...
Habits.
Yeah, 12 habits to grow against the odds, right? Well, I'm just curious, why do you have the execution first? You know, if you look at it, I mean, yeah.
These words on the bottom?
That's right. So you have execution, strategy, and vision. Whereas more often than not, we start with a vision, right? But you are putting emphasis on execution. So I'm just curious.
Okay, hold on. Let me explain a couple of things in the design here.
Right.
Execution, strategy, and vision are only there for people to make sense of what's above it. They're not part of the habits. I've learned I've learned in all of my years of studying leadership, if you don't use the word vision, which I don't like, if you don't use the word strategy, which again, I don't like, I actually like the word execution. If you don't use those words, people say it has nothing to do with leadership. Okay, so these are just on the bottom. Now, to go through the ordering, this is like an arrow that's going. The head of the arrow goes first, and typically arrows shoot across a page that way. So the lead side is lead today for tomorrow's future, have an ambitious appetite, develop future leaders today? Then it goes down this column, then this column. Fair, good question.
Yeah, and I strongly feel that these habits are really crucial for entrepreneurs as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, not just leaders, but entrepreneurs. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a great
Thank you.
question.
All right, so we have time for a few more questions. All right, we have a gentleman.
Yeah, one question, yeah?
Okay.
Mr. Tommy, thank you very much for the enlightening talk. See, my question is, you see, if you look at Europe and America and many countries, the middle income group is shrinking.
Sorry?
Middle income, you know, the size of the middle income group in the economy, these are shrinking in many economies, which means the opportunities are also shrinking, right? So what are the forces going against what you have said? All the habits, what are the forces going against this?
Yeah, I don't really know what forces would be against these habits. Yeah, I do. I do. They're probably not the forces you want. Number one would be all of the advisors. And number two would be ourselves. Because if I don't have the ambition and I'm not willing to do the habits, I stand as the force against it. So when I try to look at a very reserved, calculated 3% per annum growth rate, that is going against this. So when I adhere to that kind of thinking, that goes against this model. Yeah, it's a good question.
Do you think financial markets are one of the forces against this?
No.
No?
No. I think it's disconnected from financial markets. I mean, if I go back and if I look at every story today, do you know where McDonald's came from? McDonald's came from the purest opportunistic moment ever. 1950s, there was a highway in America called Route 66. It was used for one decade only. It was created the decade before the interstate system happened. There's a town called San Bernardino, California. San Bernardino is exactly one tank of gas, one petrol, tank away from LA. So if you're going into LA, you stop in San Bernardino to get gas. It's your last stop. If you're coming out of LA, you stop in San Bernardino because you need petrol again. So here we are, San Bernardino, California, town literally in the middle of nowhere, other than for Route 66. These guys, the McDonald's brothers, started this hamburger shop. So there they are, they've got the hamburger shop that's going on, and more people are coming because of where it's geographically located. They figure out, we need to be better at serving hamburgers. So they corrupt the way the world eats. They created fast food. Because they were doing so well, they ordered 8 milkshake machines. 8 Sir Speedy milkshake machines. Biggest order ever. Typically, people buy 1 or 2. They order 8. A guy named Ray Kroc, who's the salesman for the Sir Speedy milkshake machines in Illinois, gets this request, for these milkshake machines. And he's like, 8, what is going on? So he throws them in his car, drives Route 66 from Illinois, gets from Illinois to San Bernardino, shows up in San Bernardino and goes, what did you buy 8 for? And he looks at this thing, he's like, this is incredible. The way you're doing these hamburgers is fantastic. So he turns to the owners of the business and to the McDonald's brothers. He says, you know what? You should expand. You should take these elsewhere. Nah, we're not interested. You should franchise it. I don't even know where franchising came from at that point because McDonald's kind of invented that. But you should franchise. Nah, we're not interested. I've got an idea. Can I be McDonald's everywhere other than San Bernardino? Sure, why not? So he takes pictures, learns everything he can from the McDonald's brothers, drives back to Illinois. Now, in today's day, this is easy to do, In the 50s, this was really difficult what he did. He drives back to Illinois. He's got one small problem. Guess what he doesn't have? Any money. So here he is. He's got an idea that's fantastic. He goes to the bank, and the bank says, you're crazy. What is this? Nobody would ever do that. What's wrong with the way we sell hamburgers today? Why would anybody want anything different? No way are we giving you money. Friends, you're crazy. Financial markets, effectively, you're crazy. Coca-Cola, we'll give you money for it, but you have to serve Coke. Okay. That started their no contract relationship. Ray Kroc has since long passed away. But McDonald's corporate executives still say to this day, because Coke helped us start, we would never leave Coke. That is the thinking that we need to have. From the loyalty that's involved, that's embraced in that. Okay, we are, I don't know, I'm really bad at math. Okay, we're a lot of years away. Okay, we're decades and decades and decades away, but they're still loyal to that decision that was made in the 50s. Nobody leading Coke and nobody leading McDonald's are the same. But they still remain that level of loyalty. And he was able to see and to think about it. He had an ambition for hamburgers that nobody had. It could see what others couldn't see and went for it. That is the simplicity of what we need to be looking at as leaders. All right.
Thank you. Okay.
I have one question. Tommy, I'm here. Hi.
Yes.
My name is Guntur. I hear that you give a lot of leadership examples of business of the past. What about example of business of the future, which is industry like renewable energy? We see that Germany has been able to drive renewable energy as a new economic locomotive engine, and they developed few billion euros of business. Now, besides doing the renewable energy, carbon footprint and so forth, is there any example, any leadership example that you can share with us today on this? And knowing renewable energy, especially solar, has been giving a lot of electricity to the rural area. What about concept in shared value concept economy or community economy, or in the past we call it CSR? Can you enlighten me a little bit about these new areas of business opportunity? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the core aspect that I would really want to drive out right now would actually be is to focus on the habits, and how you apply those habits is whether it be in renewable energy, or whether it be in solar technology, although I'm an enormous fan of solar technology, whether it be in other areas, I would really step back and look at these habits, because these are the habits that are going to bring you success in no matter what. I am not a Malaysian expert, but the little bit that I can see with my eyes and the little bit I understand is I would leverage and I would try to move to the forefront of the world from an agricultural perspective. That would be the area I would be thinking about, as I would be looking and realizing that there are water and food shortages coming into the world. There's a scarcity issue there. And I would begin to think, how can I innovate in regards to that way above others? That may be hiring 2 scientists from around the world that have the innovative ideas and building the local economy behind those and the jobs behind those. But that would be the area, if I was sitting here, I would really be thinking about. And the convergence of how do you use renewable energy, how do I use solar actually, because I'm going to assume solar works well here. I don't know that, does it? Okay, I would use solar here and dive that through, but agriculture would be the piece that I would be looking at if I was sitting here right now. That would be hot on my head. But you're going to know the fundamentals of what you can support better. I want to keep our attention as much as possible on these habits, because they're what's necessary to go on. But great question.
Let's take it from a private sector perspective. I'm from the private sector. You said something very interesting, and you did predict something interesting, which is someone's going to ask you about risk management. So I'm going to be that guy who's going to ask you about risk management. So from a corporate perspective, we have this code of corporate governance now, public listed companies, for corporations, where risk management is really integral, and it's been part of your annual reports. In investments, when you go to the boards, you need to do a rigorous risk management on investments in terms of entrepreneurship. What are you going to invest in? How much you're going to invest in? Sometimes that can actually hinder vision, growth. There's also the school of thought where you mentioned just now about sprinting into growth. Some would say, why don't you do it, proof of concept, do it small, start small, then grow. How do you balance this? I mean, how do you balance this drive for growth at the same time you've got your risk management on one side? Can you probably share something on your experiences?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're doing is we live in an age of professional management now. That if I'm in the public sector, if I'm in the private sector, I want to keep my job, is what we end up working for. And this perspective deviates greatly from growth. Risk management is not about growth, it's about average. It's about maintaining the status quo. And status quo can be a 3% growth rate, a 5% growth rate. It's staying into that picture. What we tend to do is, if you look at the concept of governance is designed to avoid problems. So somebody does wrong, I put governance in place to make sure nobody else does wrong. And I begin to try to procedurally manage what could go wrong. If you look at leaders who are breakthrough leaders and who excel against everybody else, you'll notice something that's different. They're not wired the same way. That's not what they're thinking about. They're not trying to avoid the risk. They're trying to survive because they have to. They have a hunger of need. They do it because they're hungry for it. They can't help themselves. They're driven by it. We literally have to disconnect the two. If I'm obsessed with risk management and corporate governance, I need to accept I'm going to be a solid, potentially a solid but average organization. I'm going to be a solid but potentially average state. There's nothing wrong with that. That is perfectly acceptable, but it's a choice. I have to choose, do I want to grow against the odds, or do I want to be like the odds? If I want to be like the odds, then I need to say, that's great, thank you, Tommy, can you stop? If I want to grow against the odds, I have to break from my thinking. Can I tell a final story instead of a final question? Because it relates perfectly with this. So if I want to grow against the odds, I have to say I need to change from the way I was thinking. So a question for you. Sorry for using McDonald's a lot today, but I have one final question for you. If a McDonald's cheeseburger is the only cheeseburger you've ever eaten, is it the best you've ever had? If a McDonald's cheeseburger is the only cheeseburger you have ever eaten, is it the best you've ever had? The answer is yes. Of course it's the best I've ever had. So every time somebody says cheeseburger, what do you picture? McDonald's. We can interact now, okay? You picture McDonald's, correct? So we're sitting in a meeting and somebody says, hey, today let's go for lunch, and you know I like cheeseburgers, which I really do. And you say, Tommy, I want to take you to get a cheeseburger. What are you picturing? McDonald's, because it's the only one you've ever had. It's the only one you know of. What am I picturing? Potentially something different, but you're not aware of that. Because the McDonald's cheeseburger is the only cheeseburger you've ever had. So you say to me, Tommy, let's go get a cheeseburger for lunch. We jump in your car, we're driving down the road, and I see McDonald's is up on the left, and you start slowing down, and you start approaching. And I'm like, where are we going? And you say, McDonald's. Why are we going to McDonald's? It's the best cheeseburger. No. There's better cheeseburgers than McDonald's. And we start to get in this little bit of debate about cheeseburgers for a moment. And I say, you know what? I want to be respectful. You're treating me to lunch. I'm not going to make an issue of it. We go inside. We order our McDonald's cheeseburger. We sit down. We start to eat a minute. And I'm like, you know, this is good, but no, it's great. And I can see in your eyes, you love McDonald's cheeseburgers. It's the only cheeseburger you've ever had. You love the McDonald's cheeseburger. But in my mind, there's better cheeseburgers. A couple of weeks later go by and I decide I want to reciprocate. I'm going to take you out for lunch. And I say, hey, let's go get a cheeseburger today. What are you picturing? The McDonald's cheeseburger. So that's great. And you're thinking about going to McDonald's. We jump in my car, we drive down the road, and there's McDonald's coming up on the left, and we're not slowing down. And you go, where are we going? McDonald's is there. I'm like, no. I'm going to take you to have a different kind of cheeseburger. What? A different cheeseburger? We're not going to, but McDonald's is the best. No, there's a better one. No, McDonald's is the best cheeseburger there is. You're convinced it's the only cheeseburger you've ever had. We drive on up, we go to Shake Shack, we go to Five Guys, we go to whatever, something that's better in my own mind than McDonald's, and we come inside and we sit down. You're like, why are we here? Why aren't we going to McDonald's? It's the best cheeseburger. I say, no, just try this. No, but McDonald's is really good, and you're a bit mad. You know that feeling inside? Because I wanted the McDonald's cheeseburger. I order for you, finally you take a bite and you go, wow, this is a lot better than McDonald's. And what we begin to realize is there's things that are better than our ways. And as leaders, guess what? We love McDonald's cheeseburgers. The way we've always done it, the way we've always thought about it, is our McDonald's cheeseburger. But what we have to realize is unless you're already growing against the odds, if you want to grow against the odds, stop eating McDonald's. But I apologize, McDonald's, for saying that. Thank you very much.